We're thrilled to have you here today as we further dive into the topic of digital government transformation. I'm Christy Caravallo, Manager of Public Sector Marketing at PayIt, and I'll be your moderator. Today, we're going to unravel the essential principles that underpin exceptional government services like simplicity, connectivity, and continuous evolution. Creating a profound connection with residents isn't just important anymore, it's paramount. And mere guidance through services isn't sufficient for a lot of people. We've learned it's about tailoring interactions to align with individual preferences. Agencies are now encouraged to embrace digital design principles, focusing on user-centric design rooted in continuous feedback from residents. The theme is true for both US and Canada, so we'll get to hear from both geographies as well later today. Speaking of which, let's meet our exceptional panelist. Jack Laskowitz, Vice President of Client Success at PayIt, Cielo Medel, CIO and Director of IT at City of Mississauga, William Eggers, Executive Director of Deloitte's Center for Government Insights, Ron Boaz, Manager of Digital Channels of City of Vancouver, Jean Noble, Senior Vice President of Operations at PayIt, and John Telch, Vice President of Canada at PayIt. Now, without further delay, let's turn it over to Jack and see what he has to say.
Hi, I'm Jack Laskowitz, Vice President of Client Success with PayIt, and I am here to talk about creating delightful government services. Yep, that's what I said, delightful. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get started. When I was talking to a lot of these leaders putting together this content, I said, what has worked for you in terms of creating a delightful service for your residents? And in the numerous conversations that I had, that really we saw three themes, starting with simplicity, then connection, and finally evolution. We're going to get into all three of these things right now. The first item here is, what is a simple experience? And I want you to just take a moment and think about your own experiences at your agency or your department. If you were to test your experience, how simple do you feel like it is? If you thought, hey, if I'm a new resident into this community and I have to do something, do I know where to go? Do I know what to do? And so one of the pieces of advice that I got from a city treasurer, for example, is he said, you really need to test your own experience and use the resources around you for help, because a lot of us can be experts in the things that we see just about every day, but use those resources that may not always know that. So for example, he used a local college with a marketing class to say, hey, I want you to come in and I want you to pretend that you are a certain persona. I just moved here, or I just had a major life event, and so life is different for me now. And go through different scenarios and test it out and just give me feedback on what you could do. And he said it could be uncomfortable to hear some of that, but it was so insightful to understand how folks were interacting with that particular agency and in that particular area. They actually found that they did a study just even on their website, and they found that 80% of the people that were coming to their website were there to either find a bill or pay a bill. And so that's when they said, gosh, not only just making a payment is important, but an experience to get someone to making that payment is so critical. So here are some things that we learned. One, nudges work. What that means is, I don't know about you, but sometimes I'll get a piece of mail that says I've got to pay something. I'm looking at my property tax bill right now, and it says this is due in a month's time. Great. Where are you going to put it? And are you going to remember that that piece of paper is there? We all know life happens. And so it's really hard to always stay attuned to that, but it's always helpful to get those little nudges to say, hey, do you remember that thing you got to go pay? Oh yeah, let me go get that done. And so finding ways to do that with your constituency isn't a hindrance, but it's actually a service. Making the user experience, the UX, intuitive also gets you there. The harder it is, then people get frustrated and throw their hands up. That means that experience is not intuitive. Making sure that I'm thinking about, is the information where I need it to be, when I need it to be there. If that's happening, great, that's intuitive. If it's not, that's a good point to see if you can make the experience better. Putting personal information where the user needs it. What that means is, if I've given information to a particular system, can that system remember it so that when I come back, it says, oh yeah, here, is this the address you're still talking about? Yeah, it is. Great. Click, click. I'm all done. And finally, what we believe is our agencies should not feel like they need to reinvent the wheel with custom development. There are SaaS solutions, like we mentioned, PayIt provides here, that has done this for numerous other agencies and can bring that expertise to you. So the second theme is connecting with residents. And so I want you to think about, how does your department today interact with residents? You think of every touch point, every piece of mail, every phone call, office, site, maybe out mobile interactions out at the state carnival or some other interaction, maybe at the library. Think about that, and you think about having a list of services and instructions to these services that can be accessed. Think about what that means, and are you clearly communicating? And then think about the difference. Do you feel like your department is simply online, or are you digital? And I'll dig into that here in a minute. What we've learned is, first, on every touch point, guide them in a sense of like, what do you want them to do? I think what I've seen sometimes in doing our research, certain agencies can say, here are the 8 different options you can do. You can go to this location, you can go to this bank, you can maybe go to this library, you can mail. Oh, by the way, you can go online. That's an example of saying, well, yeah, we're online, people have the option to pay. But are you digital in the sense of you are committed to allowing users to digitally interact, and you're guiding them that is the preferred method of interacting with you? The second part is put your resident hat on. Think about how your residents want to engage with you. I would expect you wouldn't be surprised. You probably agree today that, do you want to call Amazon, for example? I don't even know if you can. So do your residents want to call or mail things into you? They probably don't. And I mentioned already before, being online doesn't mean being 100% digital, because the underbanked or folks that may not have the digital literacy may not have access. But if you really think about being 100% digital and finding ways to reach those individuals, more folks have smartphones than they do desktops. So are you creating methods and ways in which you can interact with the vast majority of your population? And finally, the last way I think is you think about your identity, the sovereign identity, to make it simple for residents. What that means is think about ways in which residents clearly and confidently know how to interact with you. And when they can do that, and they can do that with a lot of confidence, that removes friction, because they are not proceeding with caution, but they have every bit of confidence that the way in which they are interacting with you is one way you've guided them, you've recommended to them, and you've brought them to an intuitive interface. So the last theme of evolution is the one I want to round out with. And this quote I thought was really useful from another elected official. And they said, listen, if I do a great job, I get reelected. However, my voter base's expectations continue to change. And so this is the second ask. How have you seen expectations change in the last 2 to 3 years? It'd be shocking if they hadn't changed from your community. And when you think, and like usually when we're talking about these things in person, what I hear from a lot of treasurers or a lot of revenue related officials, they say, folks absolutely want to do way more things online than they ever have before. Folks expect things to be smart and intuitive versus fill out the same form that you've had to fill out the last 10 years, for example. And now I want you to think about what really gets in the way of meeting those expectations. Is it inertia? Is it just, hey, this is how we've done things, and so we just don't want to change our process? A lot of times it's what it is. Sometimes there are statutes or limitations, but most times in our experience, it's typically been just fighting that inertia to have somebody, a champion, stand up and say, gosh, this could be a lot better. And so some things that we've learned is, in terms of going about to evolve and affect these changes, I want you to think about separating systems of record from the user experience front end. What I mean by that is, quite often, historically, the status quo has been, gosh, this one system will be your end-to-end, top to bottom, big silo. You get the whole thing. One throat to choke is probably what they told you. But what happens is that's great, possibly right when you implement it. But then the world changes and you're kind of stuck and you have to wait to get on a roadmap to do something, or you have to pay a large amount to another statement of work to get work done. Well, if you separate those things into a front end, preferably a SaaS, software as a service based front end, then that allows you to move much faster and be much more nimble to the changing changing needs of your community in order to continue to serve them. That's why we believe in this second bullet here: launch, learn, iterate. That's all about launching services, meaningful services that are at scale to drive users to create their own gov wallets, if you will, but then be constantly learning and understanding what are the ways that we can do to tweak this. Are we saying the right things in the right order, or should the order change? And let's continue to iterate and deliver continuously improved services to your residents. That doesn't necessarily happen easily when the front end system is really got its spaghetti ties into a back end system. And so the last bullet here is that the right SaaS partner delivers those continuous improvements to the product. And I would recommend ask about how a particular SaaS vendor or partner does that. How do they do it today? And just the plug I'll make, there's another resource on payitgov.com that is a buyer's guide that I would invite you to go download and take a look at, because it gives you even more guidance in terms of how to look for and evaluate different vendors in this space. So that's it. Simplicity, connection, evolution. Think about the ways in which you can make your experiences for your constituents and your residents more simple. Think about ways in which you can connect with those individuals, and so they don't feel like they're introducing themselves to you every cycle. And finally, we know the world will continue to change. Find ways in which you can position your department or your agency to evolve along with those changing needs in terms of serving your communities.
I'm going to talk a little bit about a new survey that we just put out where we surveyed over 5,000 users of government services around the world, and with a deep dive into the US and Canada, where I'm going to present some results. And this is a part of a series of surveys we've done. 2 years ago, we did a survey of government officials around the world who are involved in digital government, what their perceptions were. And then we decided we wanted to look at citizen perceptions and see where they were the same, where they differed, and so on. So this really gets into what the actual users believe. And so here we're looking at change in the use of government services. As we know, during the pandemic, we saw probably the biggest one-time sort of increase in digital government that we've seen in years. I've been writing about this and working in it for 25 years now, including writing 2 books on digital government. And we really were catapulted into a whole new era with the pandemic in terms of digital, especially the use of cloud and other services. And so you can see some increases here. But if I want to call your attention to, on the right-hand side, how often do you interact with government through digital channels? And you see here, rarely is leading both often, always, and sometimes, which means that we still have a long way to go in terms of digital services. I wrote a book called Government 2.0 20 years ago, where at that time, a little bit really during the dot-com era, we had really estimated that we would be a little bit further than we are right now in terms of the use of digital services and digital channels. And so we still have a lot of opportunity to grow that. And let's look at the next slide. And this looks at how often you interact with different government services right now. in terms of how you would like to interact. And you see, rarely was the top, but most people we surveyed said that they would prefer interacting with government through digital applications, whether it's website, mobile applications, chatbots, so on. And even when you look at call centers here, really what we're calling call centers now is contact centers, because these call centers need to be at the really hub of the user digital experience. And when you look at omnichannel service delivery, it's that integration of contact centers and websites. So overwhelmingly, this is how people are preferring to interact with government today, but they're not right now. And you do also see in this slide that as you get closer to local levels, it increases a little bit in terms of face-to-face interactions, but still the vast majority of users prefer digital interactions, but that's not happening necessarily today. The question is why? So let's go to the next slide. What are some of the major challenges that they found? The first one is simply difficulty in navigating government websites, and that's all about the user experience. And that's something that can easily be fixed in governments. We're seeing a lot of innovations around the world, one of the biggest ones being organizing government services by life events, such as the birth of a child, the death of a loved one, you're moving into a new job, you're retiring, you're going to university. In the US, there are 9 major life events-based services that the Office of Management and Budget is pushing at the federal level, involving both different levels of government. We also see a big movement along these lines in Canada. And then you see some of the other concerns around privacy and security. And again, those are challenges the governments all over the world have been able to navigate in different ways. And what we also found was that if you provide a really good user experience and enough benefits from digital government services, that people are willing to provide more of their data, and they're more willing to see kind of government sharing data across different levels. But that user experience needs to be really good, and the benefits need to be very strong. Let's go to the next slide. So one of the major reasons why we're finding that people are very open to both using digital services, but even having a digital identity, which is really a precursor for having a seamless 360-degree user experience. You really need to have a digital identity. And in this regard, we see a number of European countries where they have a once-only approach, and they've really focused on digital identity a little bit ahead of North America in this regard. But the more people find that they're hassled by having to provide repetitive information to government time and time again, the more willing that they are and the more open they are to digital identities. Now, in North America, the way that digital identity is working for the most part is we're seeing it at the state and provincial level. States like Colorado, which have a digital driver's license, and we're seeing this happening in many different states right now. And in Canada, the British Columbia has really led the way. They started with the universal health card, and they've expanded it out as a digital identity. But really getting to where we need to be in the end, where you're providing this sort of seamless service. In Estonia, for example, you can start up a business in less than 10 minutes, provide your tax returns, and you only have to provide your information to any level of government once, and then it's shared. Getting to that really does require having a digital identity. And so that needs to be a really a major push by governments if they're really going to provide the sort of frictionless service that Jack talked about earlier. And if we go to the next slide, this looks at digital services in Canada, since there's a lot of Canadians on the call. And you see the numbers here in Canada are a little bit lower than globally, 18% compared to 25% in terms of people who regularly interact with government using digital channels. And again, what we found was that for the most part, people do want to. You see 64% of Canadians would prefer a website. And then when you add that on to some of the other digital applications here, it really is quite high right now. So a lot of opportunity for improvement and advancement in the use of digital services.
For us to provide a solution that is truly for everyone, we have to be really thoughtful in designing experiences for that underserved population first, recognizing that to be an efficient organization, the government needs to have a solution that truly can serve everyone and enable those residents to avoid the call-in or walk-in experience that's probably difficult for them and likely costly for the municipality. So this human-centered design approach really enables us to constantly be improving experiences. As a customer, you get to hear from the product team on a regular basis about what we're seeing and hearing from your residents in terms of their behavior on the platform. We generate ideas to improve this, reduce friction, and consult with you on these options, and then walk away to do the work. And so this is not at a cost. This is part of this platform mentality that's really needed in this modern age of, transitioning the channel shift and moving towards a world where everyone truly can be served digitally. It's also a really fun process. It's more fun to look at the results when we see real meaningful change and when we see feedback from residents who know it's an incredible step forward in serving their community. We talked a little bit about accessibility, and we truly believe that the right thing to do is ensuring our platform is accessible to all users. There are payment pages that truly can't be used by someone who has trouble seeing, and maybe they are using a screen reader to help them that the payment page doesn't support. This is just all too common, and again, it goes back to that decreasing trust and is often a feature that a provider would add last. We don't believe in this. As part of that human-centered design approach, we want to ensure that we're reaching all of those audiences and making it usable. Sustainability was also in the category of things that we talked about, and we as an organization are certainly committed to reducing the environmental impact, but for our agencies, that's a big area of focus. The costliness and then the environmental impact of mailing bills and having people send mail in, all of these things can be enormously reduced in an eco-friendly model where e-billing is a focus, and manual costs for the agency in terms of unstuffing mail and those kinds of things can also be curbed. So as you think about your community and the things that you want to achieve in terms of sustainability, having a digital platform that you can leverage to communicate with your community outside of mail is a huge value. Obviously the last few years have set us on a new path from a technology and reachability standpoint. It makes it imperative that we have the ability to be flexible and provide resources to our citizens that are safe and online. And so in doing so, channel shift is a big thing that we talk about. And having a modern resident experience for all transaction types in an intuitive platform can become your digital front door. And it enables your residents to really engage with you in such a way with bi-directional communication so that they can engage online, pay for things, and move on and just get things done. The last thing I'll just share is that, by providing self-service and automation capabilities, you're collecting more expediently and it's less human capital. This enables you to free up your resources for more meaningful projects, community initiatives, services that will delight your customers and really change the way that your community interacts with you, again, in that kind of bi-directional way.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Jean, for that presentation, and pleased to join everyone on this webinar. So as Jean mentioned, I'm a strategic advisor at PayIt, and depending on the day, she has the pleasure or displeasure of partnering with me. So I'm going to dive right in with some prepared questions, and if anyone has any additional ones, we'll make sure that we get to them in the chat. Ron, there's a rumor that West Coast might be the best coast in Canada. As a lifelong Toronto resident and born and raised Toronto resident, I might disagree, but I'm going to make you the sacrificial lamb to start answering the first question.
All right.
Beautiful. So this is a question for everyone, and Jean, your perspective will be a little bit different, of course, but every government agency has a goal, a perpetual goal of improving customer service and resident access to digital government services. And what are the top things that residents in Vancouver and then Mississauga are asking for right now?
Yeah, good question. So I think we actually did a opinion survey of Vancouver residents. I think it was in 2020, so it's a few years old now. And we asked them what they wanted from their digital government. It was kind of focused on Vancouver.ca as the one-stop shop for Vancouver services online. And there were kind of three main things we heard from them. One was personalization. So they wanted neighborhood specific information directly relating to their life and their community, like road closures, events, garbage pickup schedules, anything that is within the purview of the city that we could offer to them and meet them where they are. Back to the sort of human-centered design, we need to be looking at what is going to be immediately relevant to our citizens. So that was a big one. The next one was search. They wanted a better search experience. And sorry, again, this was back in 2020. This was before AI and all the sort of new GBT technology we have. And I can imagine now that this would be even more important, not just about filtering and sorting, but about really being able to deliver information immediately to the user without having to navigate through multiple pages and search for the information. And the last thing that has kind of been talked about is this concept of single sign-on, like having one platform or at least have one ability to access all your city services through a single login or through a single interface. Because again, the citizen doesn't, frankly, they sometimes don't know the difference between their regional government, their local government, even their province. They just want their water to run. They want their garbage to be picked up. They want things to work. So to that end, and this is something that we're not quite there on at the City of Vancouver. We are working towards it and working with the legacy platforms that we have and the challenges that it brings to connect your back-end systems so that your front-end systems are able to provide that service. And so that was really important for citizens as well, is just have that ability to access everything in one convenient fashion and meet them where they are, whether it's desktop, mobile. So I'll stop there.
Excellent. And how about in the city of Mississauga?
I am the CIO for the city of Mississauga. Just to give a background to everyone, hello, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. It's Mississauga is the 7th most populous municipality in Canada. It's the 3rd most in Ontario and the 2nd most in Greater Toronto area. If you don't mind, I'll start. Yes, yeah, it sure. has. I think the residents, the guests have realized that municipalities have responded very quickly during the pandemic, and that increase in digitization was there. Although the digital divide still exists. Therefore, there's a lot of residents or citizens who cannot necessarily access this technology because they don't have smart technology available currently. But I believe there is a recognition that the municipal government sector are moving towards that direction.
Yeah, I would add to that and say that I think the expectation is definitely, it's accelerated the level to which people participate and through the digital channel, while recognizing there is always going to be some people that need to pick up the phone or go in person, and that's an important channel to always retain. But we are seeing that people experience and expect faster and more convenient service, again, where they are on the run, from home, wherever they are, to be able to complete their service journey online.
John, something I might add is that exactly like Ron said, there are going to be people who still want to come in or want to make a phone call. And I think what we've seen a lot of municipalities focus on is how to make those experiences also digital, right? So we have some communities where they will actually set up iPads in the lobby of their city hall or whatever the case may be, so that citizens can come in, they can self-serve, they can engage with the people in the way that, gives them comfort, maybe even get the paper receipt, but enable them to, still have that digital interaction in a way that enables them to maybe use it in the future and also takes the burden off their frontline staff, right? So there's also this hybrid approach where, serving the people who do want to be in person can be a little flexible.
Excellent. Well, I think that's a great segue into the next question, which is, what are the biggest challenges that stand in the way of improving customer service and resident access to digital government services, and where have you seen success? And Cielo, I might start with Mississauga, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, that's very well. Yeah, there are several challenges that we continue to deal with. I find that one of the biggest challenge that we're dealing with is the way we municipalities are organized. Internal government teams are structured with lines of businesses that are siloed. And it's siloed for a reason, although it creates issues for citizen engagement. Residents and guests need to interact with multiple separate business units to access services. And this silo make it difficult to build that services to be very interconnected. And of course, aligning an operating model into a very centralized model is not the way to go in the cities and municipalities. But we do continue to arrange our operational capabilities in an integrated and well-sequenced way. Now, that being said, in the city of Mississauga, we continuously adopt, advance, and align modernization strategies that, again, affects our fiscal responsibility. We want to make sure that we balance the needs of the residents and the evolving city. It is not impossible, though, to accomplish this very huge task. It is a big task. And I have seen it done, although it delved on one channel only, which is the face-to-face or counters. In Ontario, Service Ontario, the provincial arm of the province, has moved several disparate services that are delivered through various locations to a more central hub. So, and John, you're from Toronto. So if you visit a Service Ontario site, you can get several services in the same location, such as your health card, your driver's license at the same time. And I think their digital journey, as well as their contact center journey, is following suit. But they started with that, which is most important. And the city of Mississauga is starting to think in that model as well.
Excellent. This bridges the gap nicely to our next question, which I think really echoes some of the first comments we had about post-pandemic, how are residents thinking and how are your agencies thinking? But what keeps you and your bosses up at night? Are there operational constraints? Are they budget constraints? Maybe budget shortfalls caused by a small virus that took over our lives for a little bit of time there, or things that your office is looking to technology to alleviate?
On the IT side, though, on the information technology side, there are many factors that keep me up at night, including budgetary constraints. There is more digitization required than the funding or resources available. I think that's true in every organization. And constraints to quick implementation is there. Some other things that I can think of is, well, the idea of losing control as we migrate to the cloud, ensuring customer data is protected, and making sure we do not lose the trust of our residents and guests. And of course, the ever-changing climate in cyber. It is very important for the city to protect our data. Everybody knows that. And I think every government, because that's the heart and soul of building trust and being transparent for the residents, right? We also need to make sure we know where the data is all the time. So adoption for cloud technologies is a challenge. And as Ron mentioned, the shift from traditional capital funding to operating funding, it's becoming more a challenge for us, right? How do we migrate to the cloud with subscription, forcing us to fund it through our municipal tax base, right? So it's a very challenging one. And at this city, we try to reduce costs by looking at things like using open source platform. Of course, they have to be secure. Looking at reducing our in-person services while we're trying to increase our digital services footprint, right? And of course, focus on customer experience, engagement, for services that are accessible, convenient, and making sure that these services have a connected pathway. A lot of challenges to bring forth all of this in front.
Excellent. So for everyone participating today, if you're going to drop a question into the chat, please do so at your leisure and let me know where you're from so I can proudly announce your question. But before we get to those, I want to sort of drill down on accessibility and equitable access for a moment, because Jean did cover that in her presentation. And, as we all work in government, with government, partner with government, for government in some way, there are a million different ways that a direction for IT and technology can go. It can be politically motivated. It could be a campaign promise. It could be a strategic direction after, completing 3 years worth of internal reporting and customer surveys and resident surveys. So we know that digital solutions can help eliminate some barriers to accessing and paying for many government services, but we know that simply making them available online isn't enough. So can you share examples of how your teams are working to improve equitable access to your services? And I'll let anyone jump in who wants to tackle that first.
Sure.
Maybe I can start it local, closer to you, John. I'll start with the city of Mississauga. There is a recognition that as we put forward digital solution, the divide is getting wider and bigger for residents. And so we have to make sure that we provide services, not just in its digital form, but looking at other forms of access is imperative. Technically, though, to address the digital divide in the city of Mississauga, we have been providing free wireless service in most communities, parks, and libraries and the city is lucky this way. It has been designed with its own fiber network. So we are able to give access to residents with free internet services kind of model. The city libraries are continuing to expand and grow, and they are providing technologies that the residents may not have them at home. And these technologies can be used for learning, for jobs, even leisure, such as gaming. So we ensure that there's the method to access the services as we move towards digital. And as part of that, we ensure also that the services we design are accessible. Following AODA in Ontario, it's a law to make sure that services are equitable and accessible, because it's a human right to make sure that people have access to those things. In the city, we also have technologies that help, visualization technologies, for example, that help real-time information be shared with people through a lot of this. Even our platform for engagement that we have a couple that we do that allows us to render 3D or CAD drawings for development projects to entice residents and guests to participate during those conversation is important. So we invest a lot on those type of technologies that provide different forms of access. Ron?
Yeah, I'll build on that. That's so important to have sort of tangible examples of what a building is going to look like that's going to pop up in my neighborhood soon. And on our resident engagement platform, we also have the planner who's associated with the project, a picture of them, their email, their phone, to just make it really accessible for people to reach out if they want more information. But stepping back, just on the topic of accessibility and inclusivity, it's really important to us. And one stat in Vancouver, about 44% of Vancouver residents have a home language other than English. So that really just highlights the importance to have your services available in other languages. And to go back to that opinion survey I was talking about earlier, different languages was the lowest ranked thing on that survey at the time that we did it. And we thought, that's interesting. And then we realized, well, we'd only put that survey out in English. So this goes to show that, you can miss really important things if you're not actually going out to the community. You need to talk to people. You need to meet people where they are and learn the barriers that they're facing that may be unique to that particular group, and then work with them to find a way to get them online, whether it's access to computer terminals, whether it's language barriers, whether it is, accessibility and, not adhering to WCAG accessibility standards that have been talked about that are really important for people with screen readers. So yeah, all these things can really help bring our services to people.
Perfect. So I'm going to change gears just a little bit, as Jean, you covered it in your presentation on a couple slides, in asking you all how your government offices think about sustainability. Do you have goals for sustainability that are aligned with the work that you're doing, or have you heard from residents that is something that they're interested in? So maybe Ron, I can start with you if that's all right. If you have any thoughts to that.
Yeah, good question. And sustainability is definitely important. I don't know if I'm the right person in my organization to speak to it. I know that, you know, IT has enabled the reduction in paper use, has enabled the even just commuting pollution to be reduced as we all work from home. So I can think of a number of ways in which, you know, technology, and that's kind of our role within the organization, is to improve and the efficiency of people's work with technology. So in some of those ways, that's how we can contribute to a more sustainable future for us.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, for the city of Mississauga, sustainability is one of our key attributes that we want to make sure exists in everything we do. From as we do hybrid work, and we minimize access to paper, as Ron highlighted, right, and printers, to the footprint within the buildings that we have, and putting technologies that are we can evergreen is critical. And we have also applied several technologies like IoT devices in a lot of our services, such as transit, for example. If you see the transit in the city of Mississauga, it's a very high-tech type of transit, where we can get data as people use the services, so we can improve the services better. So we apply a lot of sustainable technologies and processes, I would say, in providing the services, not just technology services, but services for residents as a whole.
You know, something that I have noticed is many of our clients that we work with, they use kind of a go green, you know, messaging. Like for them, their residents are very attached to this idea of sustainability. And so they want to encourage exactly what you both have referenced in terms of, you know, environmental impact of the commute, or signing up for e-billing, those kinds of things. They want to promote that within their community with a Go Green campaign. There's you know, efficiency and cost savings in doing so, but then also there is the community impact. And so we see it a lot from a communication standpoint, in that, you know, the IT teams typically absolutely support it from a delivery, but the communications team really enjoys to highlight it. And so I think, you know, that's obviously something we have seen a lot in the city of Toronto, and really across the continent.
Great. Shifting gears once again, you know, we think in this realm, in this work of front end systems and back end systems, and there's an adage that, you know, you can't modernize one without the other. And my question to all of you is, is that true? And what has been your experience, whether successes or challenges, in approaching that at times Herculean task of having to modernize both? And maybe Cielo, I'll start with you if that's okay.
Thank you, John. It is a Herculean job. Yes, it is. So the transformation journey for the city, as I mentioned, began in 2018, and it was very focused in creating people-centric digital services. What we have done is move away from the big platforms or monolithic application approach, and we adopted microservices to allow us to go fast with the speed. Now, although in saying that, the approach in handling the front end and the back end is still separate. It's still being handled it's not a very seamless model. And addressing the access to services, which we know is beyond digital, that we know that the resident should be able to have the same experience in all forms, whether it's through counters, through 311 or call center, as well as digital. So it is becoming very imperative that we look at the front end and the back end. good news for us is there is a recognition that in the city, the need for focusing on customer experience as well as employee experience to make sure that as residents put in their requests, the back end services flow through. And it's not a frustrating journey for both in and out kind of model, right? So we are starting to embark on that one in creating that model that with the siloed organization, we're trying to bring lines of businesses together. And so that we can prioritize how do we make our digital service more efficient, and it links up to our internal services as well. So it's a big organization that you need to deal with because it's pretty much every line of business that you need to bring to the table, right? And within IT, we needed to look at our operating model. Our operating model had to be reviewed on an ongoing basis as disruptors, just like the pandemic happened. How do we support those ever-changing needs of the organization in its service delivery? So we, aside from changing the strategy around customer experience and employee experience, we are focusing on enterprise technology architecture that may include low-code platforms, as well as looking at our strategy around cloud-based solution. We need to support the modernization agenda, and the only way we can do that is preparing ourselves to be ahead of the game, so that as we develop these strategies for customer and employee experience, the technology side could respond to it very easily and quickly, because we know it's going to change. That's where we're at. How about Vancouver, Ron?
Yeah, I mean, it's when you have old systems, we find ways to integrate them where we need to, but it's not often easily reproducible or migratable. And we are moving to, we need to have API management and governance and be able to connect our systems more seamlessly so that those integrations don't break, at least as easily or as often. So it's kind of an ongoing journey for us, and I do think it's critical to integrate those internal systems and have them talk to each other, and be able to, just kind of on a side note, like the data from all these systems, being able to bring them into a common data lake or warehouse to be able to look at your data at a system-wide level and then make strategic decisions, and not just be looking at things in silos. So it's an ongoing journey.
Great. Well, in the vein of doing things differently, my question to you all is, we've just discussed this sort of at the top end of this session of residents, constituents, for the most part, have a different view now of how they want to interact with government. They have a different view of how business should be done online. For example, they've made the decision they're not cooking tonight, they're too busy, whatever the reason might be, it's time for Uber Eats. It's a 30-second interaction and off they go. And they have expectations of government, replicating those same interactions, that same journey. What advice can you offer agencies as they seek to create this more consumer-like experience, or for residents seeking seamless online experiences with interfacing with government? And Ron, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. So I think, and what we try to do in Vancouver is we try to establish digital design principles that have the end user in mind and let those drive the development of a product or a service. So like these are really high level things, like time is valuable, start with user needs, help users avoid errors, consistency builds trust, accessibility is fundamental. And the idea is to come in with these digital design principles to the project team at the very onset and get everyone to agree to them. And if you're able to get in early enough, it's not that hard to get people to agree because they all just make sense. They're common sense things. But what that does is if you get buy-in in the beginning, then you can keep referencing them over the lifespan of the development of that service. And people are going to always want to, well, this would be, if we did this or this, it'll be easier for our staff. But then you go, no, it might be easier for your 5 staff, but what about the hundreds of people that are going to suffer if we do it this way down the line? And it just allows you to keep referencing these user-centered design principles. And that's what you got to do. You got to just keep the user in mind, because that is what people have come to expect. That's what's out there in the commercial world, because, you know, as a profit-seeking organization, you're always going to be looking at what's going to acquire and retain our customers. And we can sometimes lose sight of that. And that's what we can't allow to happen. We need to be always thinking about the user and what's going to make things easier for them.
Yeah, Ron, we have a very similar mentality around that, in that it gives you a North Star so that anytime something comes up, you can go back and say, like, okay, does this fulfill these principles? And it really keeps things on the rails, right? It really keeps us reminded about where we're going and what's important. And so I think, you know, the ones you listed are incredible and very similar to the way we think about it.
Yeah, and I concur 100%. User-centric design, which starts from listening, having the voice of the customer, giving them the platform to participate and engage them in the build, and getting their feedback. And when I talk about user, for me, it's both, again, residents, guests, and internal users, the employees, right, that are affected by all of this. So having that balance, also going small chunks, quick, make mistakes, and get that feedback, because that's the only way you're going to make it better, as opposed to thinking big and trying to solve the entire big problem is a difficult one. So trying to move as quickly as possible in small chunks, getting that voice of the customer and feedback is critical, is what I would suggest. We all do.
Perfect. Well, I think that's probably a good place to pause and wrap up. And I want to thank the three of you for joining me today. I've done this quite a few times, and I don't think I've ever had an easier group.
All right. Well, man, great discussion. I'd love hearing from, folks that are working in the roles day to day, folks like William that are studying this space, and then folks that are serving these wonderful partners like John and Jean. So we've got a handful of questions before I jump in to answering a few questions. If you still have a question, please enter it in the Q&A dialog box. And then just like the user-centered bits that we just talked about, we're also user-centered. So make sure you help us out by answering or taking that survey that you'll be redirected to at the end of this episode. So the first question that I see come across says, what specific strategies do you see others using to reduce costs and increase efficiency in digital service delivery? Well, I think about this in two ways. So Jack Lazarus from the beginning of the episode, by the way. So I think about this in two ways. In terms of strategies to reduce costs and increase efficiency, I think first starts with bringing folks into the digital realm. That's a very efficient and cost-effective channel for many departments and agencies. And so that starts with, for the folks that are more and more used to doing things online that we just talked about, giving them channels to do that digitally versus call in, walk in, mail in. That's the first thing. That's, we see that as just making that available is the first step. But I think the more important piece is more so around once you have things digitally, kind of making it available is one thing, but then making it intuitive and easy to use and whatnot is the one that actually is more cost effective. We see pretty often options or avenues for individuals to interact with agencies and departments and get their work done that are actually pretty hard to do. It's either clunky, hard to find, hard to navigate, confusing, that actually generates more calls, more walk-ins, probably not as many mail-ins, but maybe. And so having those things that we just talked about, where folks get it's easy to use, they understand it. John used that Uber Eats analogy where, hey, I'm able to provide you information one time, you remember that, you come back, make it super fast. Things like an example of this is actually just really effective adoption communications that we do here at PayIt. Just going to use an example that we do today. for those periodic things like a property tax that's due on a regular basis, or some sort of a utility or water, refuse, trash, sewer, whatever that thing is. Those just regular nudges to folks, and something as simple as, we all check our emails mostly every day. Just say, hey, this thing is available. It's due. You click on it, it gets you right to the thing you need to handle, not just to a page to then go re-enter in a lot of information. Those are the things that end up being really cost effective because it's faster, it's easier, and reduces some of the more costly channels that we operate. And actually, it doesn't eliminate them. It actually opens up time for that staff to get done some of the things that they want to get done, or sometimes don't have the time to get done. So that's those are some of the strategies. They're kind of basic, but the strategies are getting the digital channels, in my opinion, getting the digital channels available, and then making sure that those things are user-centered designed to be efficient for your constituents. And when you do that, it actually makes it easier operationally on the back end. So good question. Second question that came through, could you share some examples of how you're personalizing digital government experience for residents? Yeah, great question. This comes up often. So I would say these are most effective and most important for your highest volume interactions, the things that really make an impact on your agency or department. And then two, also that a huge amount of your constituents or your community uses. So I think one example that was mentioned is like, hey, we may have 5 folks in the office, but this is hundreds or thousands of people that we're serving on in a particular category. And that's where you want to personalize those experiences. We talk about kind of a dashboard, a landing page, that if I'm a resident in a particular community and my regular items that I do with respect to my municipality or with a province or a county or even with a state, those are the things where I want to be remembered. I don't necessarily want that information. I think I mentioned it earlier. I don't want that information to have to type that in every time, or have to put a Post-it note on my desk to remember to go back and do something. And so personalizing information just allows a user, is where you want to have a user provide the appropriate and the just enough information for you to say, okay, great, I'm going to remember that this email address that is logged in or whatever is connected to this property, for example, and then the actions that are associated with that property owner that you're requiring those property owners to take on some regular basis, whether it's monthly, quarterly, or annually. And then also the other things that are not periodic, hopefully, so something like a parking ticket, being able to just efficiently get that information in, provide the information through an integration, and be able to get that work done in a timely manner is really important. So those are the personalization components. The other thing I would recommend, though, in doing that, find the things that have the most impact and focus on those pieces first, because you'll see the benefits start to pay off faster than, I think one pitfall a lot of folks run into is that they say, okay, well, we're going to personalize absolutely everything. And that's great, but sometimes the pursuit of perfection is the enemy of good. Have you heard that saying? So find the right things, and we do this every day. We find the right things that you can drive a lot of value first. I remember talking to a city treasurer. He's like, start with the big stuff, make an impact, and that gives you the time to go work on the things, the next set of things, and the next set of things, the next set of things, versus, hey, we've got to architect personalization for all of the services that we offer at the first go. That actually could be a real danger in terms of making progress and moving forward. Well, I've gotten through most of the questions, and we're out of time. So, Christy, I'm going to send it back over to you. And if you didn't get your question answered, tune in, and we'll carry some of these forward to our episode next Wednesday. Okay, thanks a lot.
And before we wrap up, I would just like to thank our insightful panelists who made time to contribute to today's discussion. Jack, John, thank you so much for fielding QA. And mark your calendars, because our exploration of digital government excellence continues. Join us next Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern for episode 3 on Building for the Future, evaluating technology to drive digital government service delivery success. Have a great day, and we hope to see you next week.